We entered Belize's territorial waters, the 12 nautical miles from shore recognized by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea as sovereign territory. That means no other country, not even Guatemala as a completely hypothetical example, could suddenly claim these waters as their own or board us here, even if they suddenly decided to declare it a war zone, for example. Within that 12-mile zone, all of Belize's domestic laws apply, and within the 24 miles from their shore, the contiguous zone, some of those same laws apply. Within territorial waters, vessels have the right to innocent passage. That means passing through without causing any trouble or stepping ashore. In fact, there has been a border dispute between Guatemala and Belize in this area, with each country seeking to claim a little more land and a little more sea on either side. It would be completely unthinkable, unacceptable, and nonsensical for either of the nation's governments to start capturing people and vessels over the dispute, let alone seizing vessels outside of the contested area. So we exercised our right to navigate safely, knowing that only Belize had the authority to inspect our boat if necessary. And of course, as non-violent travelers not causing any harm, they would have no reason to seize the crew, commandeer our vessel, or steal its contents. Fortunately, nothing like that is happening in this area of the world. Only petty theft that we've heard reported recently in Livingston. But the wind ignored the forecast. Instead of a good wind on the beam, we had another day of beating into it. Classic. We were still having a canine medical emergency on board. We headed towards Belize City to get veterinary help. Before making our final push up north, we pre-cooked as much as possible in the solar cooker since we'd run out of propane. I quickly got all the solar cookers out this morning, try and make the best as possible food with what we've got. Our friends accompanied us, and because it was 2 sailboats, it became a race. How far do we have to go? Like 5 mile? 1 mile?
No, it's about 7 or 8 miles.
Okay. Well, there's 2 of us, so it's a race.
Almost time for us to change some ropes in our boat.
Luckily, Choco's poops became normal again, so we traveled north through the first narrow, shallow pass to get back to the open sea. The charts don't always reflect the true reality of depths in an area. Our worry is always that things can shift and the depths are less than advertised. We could see on the satellite imagery that the depth could jump up quickly here. Even at high tide, this spot was surprisingly shallow. The most shallow depth we saw was 1.3 meters, and the number 1.4 that you see on the screen means that we had about 40 centimeters of water under our keel. Next came the trickiest stretch for most boats in this area, a surprisingly busy section along an otherwise quiet coastline. Navigating these shallow waters was nerve-wracking, of course, but I'm glad that we did it. Now we know how to handle this area next time we visit Belize. As is kind of normal, the central area of the cut has a little more water, as the tide probably cuts out a little bit of the narrowest spot. And I'm happy because we have a lot of traffic lined up behind us. It's such a beautiful place, and I always wish that we could stay longer. Long Key was our last chance to transition back out into the open ocean. We crossed the reef entrance in calm conditions, hoping that the wind would finally turn in our favor after. But, like the rest of our trip, so far, we faced headwinds despite the forecast. There's nothing to do but to keep on beating into it. At least the weather was pleasant. We've been traveling all day, waiting for that southeasterly, and it never came. It remained always and completely a northeasterly, as usual.
It's never where we need to.
Yeah, I don't understand how going north or going south, the wind can always be in your face here. I don't understand how that works. It's like the easterly is always upwind. We gave in to the reality of our forecast rather than continuing on with what we hoped the forecast might be, and we tacked more out to sea. We're heading right back where we came from, at 2 knots.
We're heading that much south?
Yep.
What are you doing, 120?
136. Backwards at 2 knots. That's our sailing situation. I don't know why the current is not helping us, and I can't point any more northward. It keeps on getting harder and harder, which I guess makes sense. That means we're going the easterly. The so-called easterly might be basically in my face now.
You want to tack again? Then yes, the wind is almost easterly right now. We're doing almost 130 we can do.
Then, at nightfall, the wind finally shifted, coming from the east and pushing us forward smoothly. We entered now into Mexican waters. There were many cruise ships that were lit up like disco dance floors as usual, so that they're highly visible, but difficult to quickly judge in what direction they're heading if you don't have AIS. Our speed picked up. With the Gulf Stream's help, we were finally flying, making incredible time. Then more, and even more. The water was filled with sargasso weed, but after some active and attentive cleaning of the lines, Robbie managed to bring on board some breakfast.
over there.
500 years ago, these waters weren't governed by maritime laws as we recognize them today. They were ruled by cutlasses and cannons. There were no UN regulations, just conquistador codes and colonizer chaos. Maritime law was still in its infancy.
The year 1492. During this period of awakening known as the Renaissance, lived Christopher Columbus. He read books by such men as Marco Polo, Aristotle, and Ptolemy, a Greek geographer whose map showed the world with a curved surface with water separating Europe and Asia. All helped to inspire his great dream, the dream of sailing west to Asia. As he sought support, some people were intrigued by his well-considered reasoning, but it was a royal court that Columbus had to convince. Only from a monarch could he get the authority and money for the expedition.
A discovery of a new route to the east might help us match the prosperity of Portugal.
In that same era that the Spanish ships came crashing through the Caribbean waves of the Yucatan Peninsula as they were hungry for conquest, the same monarchy that funded those expeditions was simultaneously obsessed with policing religion. In the Inquisition, they forced Jewish people and Muslim converts to prove their Christianity under threat of torture or death. They called the Mayas' occasional ritual sacrifice barbaric, while back in Madrid, they were publicly executing heretics in the town square, expelling thousands, and seizing property, all in the name of religious purity.
While Columbus sought in vain for the cities of Asia on this and two other voyages, opportunists followed upon his discoveries with an unrestrained lust for fortune. A most daring conquistador, Hernando Cortes, was, like many of the others, a soldier searching for victories in the New World.
It was Cortes who led several expeditions along this very same coastline that we were sailing now, aiming to seize as much as he could. It is from history that we learned that imperialism is not only typically about religious conquest, it's also about conquest of land and resources. By the 1800s, what was then called New Spain reflected that reality, with newly Spanish-speaking populations extending nearly to what is now Canada's border, all the way down to present-day Panama.
By now, the land that had once been a mere barrier was known to be a new world, one which Spain was to dominate for 2 centuries.
This serves as a reminder that throughout human history, demographics, including language and architecture and culture, inevitably shift. Things change. Sometimes the change occurs gradually and peacefully through cultural exchange, trade, migration, and diplomacy. In other cases, it unfolds rapidly and violently, as the colonial power, or in other words, the more powerful entity, imposes their will rather than allowing organic relationships between societies to develop. We tend to see that powerful and wicked people rarely suffer consequences. But as many times as this story repeats over and over again, we forget to learn from it. So now I think it's time to listen. Finally, we arrived at our next destination, an island that many familiar with our videos might recognize. The Island of Women, Isla Mujeres, Mexico. The sun was unrelenting, but it was good to be back, where I could enjoy a homebrewed batch of watermelon kombucha. I made this video about our passage from Belize to Mexico, I think because I was inspired by, or rather frustrated by, another YouTube video that was covering the subject of the British aid vessel, the Madleen, which was apprehended by Israeli forces before it could get to Gaza on June 9th of this year. The channel I'm speaking of claims to focus on maritime policy, although I think they did a really poor job at explaining the actual legalities surrounding the incident. I wanted to tell the story from our perspective on a sailboat, as sailboat travelers. The presenter of that video claims that he didn't want to get into politics, yet within the first minute of that video, he does take a solid stance, mocking the idea of delivering aid by a small sailboat, suggesting that the crew would probably eat it all before they got there, as if they were planning to consume prosthetic limbs, medical supplies, and baby formula. In any case, they were obviously only carrying a small, symbolic amount of aid on board, because of previous boats, people, and cargo having already been lost due to Israeli aggression in the area. Worse than that, he never clearly states that Israel's actions are illegal. There is no gray area on this. The occupation, annexation, and utter annihilation is illegal. Continuing daily to kill thousands upon thousands of children is illegal. Enforcing a blockade to purposefully cause starvation is illegal. And seizing an aid vessel, whether in international waters, whether inside the contiguous zone, or within another nation's territorial waters, is also illegal. This was the last known position of the vessel before the GPS was reported by the Madleen to have been jammed. This is the furthest they could have traveled in the hours before they were intercepted, and these are the territorial waters of Egypt and Gaza, indicating that they most likely were abducted in international waters. The law is very clear, and I think those who attempt to muddy the waters on these matters are purposely trying to rob people of their freedom and their right to life. However, I think that in both our videos, we both agree that these days, maritime law is being applied much too loosely, especially in life and death circumstances at sea. I would like to say thank you to each and every person who supports our channel and supports our videos. It's not always popular to make videos on these kind of controversial subjects, obviously, but I felt the need to give a perspective. As people who live full-time on our sailboat, especially on this particular subject, we will see you next video. Thanks for watching.